Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Barbara.
How are you?
Good. It's a beautiful day.
It
The
is.
sun is out.
And I know that you've been busy because you are working at your job. I guess you're lucky, fortunate, at the Center for Performing
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
And you're also gearing up to direct a show
I
for the Minnesota
am.
Jewish Theater Company.
I am, which I'm really excited about, and also grateful to have the opportunity to work, right? So many of us are not able to do that right now. So I'm really grateful for that too.
Good. So you have directed two shows for us in the past. What I
Yeah.
Thought I Knew, which was a solo show,
Yes.
and then a show with two women, Collected Stories.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up, you are directing 25 Questions for a Jewish Mother, again with two women.
Yes.
And, it's been very fun getting ready to go into rehearsal because you and I have been going around to different sites and seeing people's backyards.
Yes.
And I have been so impressed with how creative your director's mind works. Like when we were at this backyard yesterday, I
Yes.
was looking at it as a playing area kind of at a perch, but you found this really lovely area under a tree.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say I'm always like, no matter where we are, I'm always looking for architecture for actors to play off of, um, as well as, the funny thing about that particular spot was as soon as I stood under that tree, I had this sense of the scope of audience, which actually felt very much like being in the Highland Community Center, that sort of wide open access to the audience in that way. And that felt really exciting to me, sort of as from the point of view of a performer and audience relationship. And then when I sort of turned around and it made this beautiful frame to sort of hold this story conversation between these two actors.
Have you directed anything outdoors before?
Yes, I have actually. Way back a million years ago, when I lived in New York, I spent 2 summers directing, I guess, interns, right? The New York Stage and Film does their Powerhouse series every year at Vassar.
Yes, I know
And
that because I went to Vassar.
oh, that's right. I knew that. I did know that.
Although they started that program after I graduated, but
Sure. So there's the professional play development series that's the Powerhouse. And then they have a whole class of college students that come in as interns that assist on that professional series, but then they also have their own educational track, including they bring in a professional director to direct them in a performance that's then performed outdoors.
where do they
So
perform it? Is it on the campus? Because I'm trying to picture where that would be.
it is on campus, and it's up to you where you want to perform it.
Oh, okay. Well,
Right?
they have that lake
And that's where,
with a
actually,
hill.
in relationship to that hill and lake is where we performed both times.
Oh,
It wasn't
nice.
precisely in the same spot, but it was, yes, down the
Oh,
hill, and then there's the water, and then yes, it was really beautiful, and exciting to think about how to work in that natural architecture, and how do you provide visual focus for an audience, access, right, for an audience, so that they can feel connected and intimate, even though you're in this wide open space. And then also, actually, as a learning opportunity for young performers, when you don't have walls to sort of contain your performance, and and keep your focus on where you're working, it's a very different performance experience. So it was really interesting, both as a director and then functioning as a teacher for those students as they worked through trying to figure that out. And we did not have access to microphones, so they were on their own for that. I'm really excited and grateful that as we start working on 25 questions, that we are going to have microphones and amplification, because that definitely simplifies and allows the actors a much wider range of expressiveness, both physically and then vocally, if they don't have to fight against the wind and the birds.
Right. Well, I don't know that I ever would have thought about doing an outdoor production, at least, you know, it's not something that had occurred to me before.
Of course.
Although we have performed in people's homes, but just under the current COVID-19 pandemic and wanting to be producing, it was really the only way to go. And then, of course, wanting it to be safe for audiences and not have aerosol being put out into, you know, the audience or amongst the actors. It just,
Absolutely.
you know, we had to get these mics. So it's a new experience.
It is, but I think, Barbara, it's really testament to your ingenuity and flexibility. So many people have looked at this moment and said, I can't, we just can't. I don't know how to, I just can't. And you've just jumped in and said, let's figure it out. And let's find a way that people can share story in community again. And, you know, this video series that you're doing is definitely one way of doing that. And that's something that lots of people are doing and can feel, can sort of get us through. But there's nothing like being able to share a story in person with other people. Yes. In this super, like, as safe as can possibly be managed way, outdoors. And you and Emily have been so intentional with, even as we're going in these backyards, thinking about how groups, you know, couples or small sort of pods of people are going to be located in relationship to each other, and then in relationship to the actors. I've really, there's deep intention and care in the way that you're putting that together, and it's really lovely.
Oh, thank you. Well, we have to. I mean, we have to
do
this in a very safe way.
I know.
But I'm confident that it will be an experience that our audiences will enjoy. And I think it'll be fun for artists too. I mean, artists have not been working.
I know.
For months and months and months. I want to go back to your mention of teaching. I mean, you were working with interns, and I know over 20 years now you've been a director and a teacher. Do you approach that work differently?
That's a really interesting question. I would say definitely the experience of teaching is both a different experience and requires a different skill set. Mm-hmm. But also at the same time that there's considerable overlap. I feel like, well, and also that, you know, there's professional directing, and then there's teaching in a classroom. And then there's sort of a hybrid, which is directing students, which is not the same thing at all as professional directing. It's a very different relationship and requires really different skills. But it's also different from being in a classroom with students and moving through a syllabus, which I have also done. So the thing about most of what I've done, I would say, with students has been in that sort of middle ground. And when a group of people, no matter what their position in life and education and professionalism may be, gets together to work on a script, everybody's responsibility above and all everything else is to the story, right? That's sort of a fundamental agreement when you walk in the room, is that we're all here for the story and our responsibilities to the story, and then to each other. So I actually think it's just like the nature of that responsibility to each other that kind of shifts whether I'm working in a professional situation or working with students. My responsibility in a professional situation is to create a space where the story can emerge from out of a community in which everyone has what they need to do their best possible work, right? I feel like holding that space and finding the ways that this community needs to function so that everyone can bring their best possible work is really, that's the job as a professional director. And then to, make sure that we're all sailing on the same, in the same direction. With
The
students,
same universe.
Exactly. Yes, that there's lots of flexibility within there, but that we all agree that on the story that we're telling.
The backstory, who the people are,
Exactly.
where they are, right, right.
This is a story about a woman who receives a gift, right? Or this is a story about a man who comes to terms with a terrible truth.
What do you
right?
say, if you were to encapsulate, what is the story about 25 Questions for a Jewish Mother?
That's an excellent question. I would say that's coming to that sort of like distilled story is actually something that I think is the first and most important thing that I do as a director, no matter what the circumstance. I'm still honing the one for 25
This
questions.
is a little bit different.
It is. But I feel like because there's a bit of documentary theater, right, to this particular script, in that there are interviewed voices being expressed and animated for us by a single person, then expresses these transcripted, interviewed voices from particular points of view. And then the other character is sort of standing in for the author of the script, who is the person who initiated all of these interviews. So there's both these singular voices talking about singular experiences, but I feel like the key is actually going to be in allowing that to be a conversation and allowing us to be with the actor playwright who initiated this whole larger journey, to go with her as she is asking questions about and trying to understand or imagine, in this particular circumstance, what does it mean to be a Jewish mother, right?
And I love it because so much of what comes out is in some ways specific for a Jewish mother, but in some ways is so true to motherhood, right?
Definitely. I've been thinking too a lot about when a person becomes a parent in whatever circumstance, there are a lot of, there's some cultural pressure, general sort of dominant cultural pressure, and a lot of assumptions that get made about how you're making that choice and why you're making that choice and what that's going to look like for you. I do feel like women in particular experience a rather extraordinary amount of cultural pressure when they choose to become a parent.
Right.
And so I feel like this story plays out that dissonance between cultural pressures and your internal experience, just in this super specific way, right? And that it's asking some specific questions, but it's talking about that experience that I think all women who become mothers have, which is how do I navigate my way through this relationship when I have all of these assumptions and pressures coming at me externally about how I should approach this relationship and why I would even have this relationship and what it's for and how I want to navigate it. I remember when my husband and I first were like, yes, now's the time. We're going to have kids. We sort of shook hands on an agreement that that we were going to make different mistakes from the ones our parents made, right? That was like our parenting, our co-parenting agreement was whatever we did, we knew we were going to make lots of mistakes. We were just going to try to have them be different. And I feel like that.
I remember thinking the same thing.
Right? And I feel like that is also sort of the core of what this actress, what Judy Gold and Kate Moira Ryan, the playwrights, when they embarked upon this project, that's sort of like the core, I think, of what they were trying to get at is what do different mistakes look like, and what are the valuable things that we can find, like, because there is real value as well. Like, both my husband and I both learned wonderful, useful, warm, loving things from our parents. And we want to make different mistakes.
Right.
Right.
Do you ever bring your role as a parent or what you've learned in parenting to your work in the theater world?
Yes, I would say I have learned a lot.
Because your actors are your little children?
No, good gracious, no. I would say I have learned a lot about being a human from the experience of parenting. Like the biggest lesson for me has been like the Zen master level life class of surrender, of understanding how little control I have in the world. And that in and of itself, I actually feel like has directly fed into my work, because it's helped me keep a very focused eye on what I do have, not control over, but the ability to change.
Well,
right? That
as
there's
a
lots
parent,
and lots of things that I don't.
As a parent, and as our
Yeah.
children grow up, we really lend more guidance as they become more independent.
Yes.
And I'm not a director, but I would think that from my observations that directors, facilitate a maturation process. When you're in the rehearsal room, you're lending guidance to the discoveries and the work that in the end gives you, telling us the story that's told on stage.
Yes, I mean there is an aspect of that in that how much literal participation you have in what's being made is more intense at the beginning and then gradually fades out, so that you do, I mean, and that is a parallel. Now your son is older than my kids, but my kids are on this cusp of they're almost 16 and 12 of shifting out. There is always an experience as a director when you're done and the thing goes on without you,
and it has a life without you.
It does
Right.
And I actually think that's a really important part of the directing job is being able to let it continue to grow and shift and be its own living thing apart from your ability to control it. See,
Right.
it's all about that process of
You're nurturing.
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it's nurturing. Sometimes it's a different energy, depending on the story and the group of artists that you're working with. The energy of it shifts, but definitely that like intimately involved to, surrendering your involvement.
Right.
Is definitely a big part of the process.
Let's talk a little bit about audiences,
Yes.
because you have worked in a couple of big cities.
Yes.
Boston, where you
Yep.
went to graduate school at Harvard.
I did.
So Boston, Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
the Twin Cities, New York.
Yep.
Do you think that audiences experience theater in a different way in those cities at all?
Oh.
Or at different theaters? I know sometimes actors will talk about the audiences at the Minnesota Jewish Theater Company, and they have distinct qualities about them.
I would definitely agree with that. The community that you've built around Minnesota Jewish Theater Company is quite extraordinary. You and I have talked about this before. And I actually think there's some real Jewish cultural values behind that, of dialogue and question, and really being excited about engaging in stories and ideas in really active ways. And I think that's something that, like, I personally, as a director, as I work in other venues, have sought that kind of investment and generosity, honestly, on the part of audiences, and that they are they're willing to claim that agency, right? That I am here, and part of me being here is that I'm actively participating and being here. It is really exciting and satisfying to be able to bring a story in front of an audience that's engaged in that very particular way. And it is something that I try to cultivate in other places. It's a little hard as a freelancer, because you're just dropping in here and there. But it's a value that I have as an artist, that I'm bringing a story so that we can have a conversation, right? I'm not just presenting something completed and hermetically sealed and for you to take off the shelf and take home with you. That there's this living, breathing thing, and we as artists come with our part, and you as audience come with your part, and then something new is made in the middle.
It's that relationship that makes
Yes.
it so alive, and I think that's what right now theater goers are really missing and hungering for. Because
artists are too.
Say that again.
Artists are missing and hungry for it too.
Yes. Well, I am excited to get to experience 25 Questions for a Jewish Mother, because of the intimacy, even though it's outdoors, that I think there will be shared between the audience and the actors on stage.
Definitely.
So
it's gonna be a really precious gift for all of us to share, to experience live storytelling together again.
At this time, for sure. Well, thanks for talking this afternoon, and I will see you soon.
Absolutely. I love talking to you always, Barbara.
Thank you, Jenny. You as well. Bye.
Bye.